The deep calls for Jake had been diving for years, but nothing could have prepared him for the nightmare that awaited him beneath the waves of the Devilish Trench. The isolated dive site, miles off the coast, was known for its staggering depths and eerie silence. Few dared to explore beyond the marked limits, but Jake prided himself on being fearless. His dive partner, Lisa, was less enthusiastic. "We stick to the plan," she warned as they descended into the cold, blue abyss, no deeper than 150 feet. No caves, no wrecks. Jake nodded, but he was already thinking about going further. At 120 feet, the ocean became a different world, quiet, oppressive, endless. Schools of silver fish darted past, disappearing into the gloom. The deeper they went, the more alien it felt. Then, at 145 feet, something caught Jake's eye. A shadow. It moved just beyond the reach of his flashlight. Something long and impossibly dark. He turned sharply, aiming his light toward it, but there was nothing there, just the vast, empty sea. His heart pounded. A trick of the mind, he told himself. Nitricosis could mess with your head at this depth. Then he saw it again. This time, it was closer. A figure. Lisa tapped his shoulder, her wide eyes asking if he was okay. He hesitated before giving the okay signal. No need to freak her out, but then the figure moved. It drifted toward them, its form becoming clearer. A diver. But something was wrong. The wetsuit was faded and tattered, and the mask was cracked. The oxygen tank was rusted, and the body inside it wasn't human anymore. Jake's breath caught as the figure raised a pale, decomposed hand and beckoned. Lisa screamed, her regulator slipping from her mouth. She fumbled to put it back, her movements panicked. Jake grabbed her, signaling for them to ascend. But when he turned back, the figure was gone, or so he thought. A cold hand closed around his ankle. Jake looked down, and his heart nearly stopped. The figure had no eyes, just black, gaping voids that stared into his soul. More shapes were rising from the depths, ghostly divers, their bodies swaying in the current, all reaching for him. Jake kicked hard, breaking free, and grabbed Lisa. They ascended too fast, ignoring the safety stops. His lungs screamed, his vision blurred, but he didn't care. They breached the surface with a gasp, hauling themselves onto the boat. Lisa clutched at him, sobbing. "Did you see them?" she whispered. Jake didn't answer, because as he looked down into the water, he saw them still waiting below, dozens of them, their eyeless faces turned upward, and one was wearing his dive suit, smiling, waiting for him to come back. "Would you ever dare dive again after that?" "You said, make it longer," Chach said. The deep calls for Jake had been diving for years, but nothing could have prepared him for the nightmare that awaited him beneath the waves of the Devilish Trench. The isolated dive site was miles off the coast, a place few dared to explore. The locals called it cursed stories of divers disappearing without a trace, their equipment found washed up days later, torn apart like something had chewed on it. But Jake had always chased the thrill, the unknown. He thrived in places where others feared to go. His dive partner, Lisa, wasn't so eager. "This place gives me the creeps," she said as she checked her gear. "We stick to the plan, no, deeper than 150 feet. No caves, no wrecks." "Got it," Jake smirked, adjusting his mask. Yeah, I got it." The water swallowed them whole. At 50 feet, the sunlight above turned into a rippling halo. At 100 feet, the world grew darker, quieter. The silence was the kind that pressed against your ears, reminding you that you didn't belong here. At 120 feet, the ocean felt like another planet. Schools of fish glided past like ghosts. A strange, unnatural current tugged at them, as if pulling them deeper. Then Jake saw it. It was just beyond the reach of his flashlight, something long and dark, moving through the water. He turned sharply, aiming his light toward it. Nothing, just the endless blue. A trick of the mind, he told himself. Nitrogen narcosis could play games at this depth. He checked Lisa. She seemed fine, scanning the ocean with cautious eyes. Then he saw it again. This time, it was closer. A figure. Jake froze. It drifted toward them, its form becoming clear. A diver. But something was wrong. The wetsuit was faded and tattered, the mask was cracked, the oxygen tank rusted, and the body inside it wasn't human anymore. Jake's blood turned to ice. The diver's limbs moved unnaturally, like something was wearing a human body, trying to mimic the living. Its head twitched toward him, and through the shattered mask he saw nothing but darkness where eyes should be. Lisa grabbed his arm. Her eyes were wide with terror. "Did you see that?" Jake forced himself to breathe. He gave her the okay signal, but he wasn't sure if he was lying. Then the figure moved. It raised a pale, decomposed hand, and beckoned him closer. Lisa screamed, bubbles escaping in a frantic burst. She fumbled, nearly dropping her regulator. Jake grabbed her, signaling for them to ascend. Then a hand closed around his ankle. Jake looked down. More figures were rising from the depths. Not one, not two, but dozens. Ghostly divers, their bodies swaying in the current, their faces twisted in eternal agony, their eye sockets empty voids. Their wetsuits were torn, their tanks One of them reached for Lisa. She kicked, panicked, pushing against Jake as she tried to flee. He felt himself being pulled downward, the grip tightening, impossibly strong. His heart hammered, he kicked hard. His fin connected with something soft, and the hand released him. Jake grabbed Lisa, yanking her upward. They ascended too fast, their minds screaming about decompression sickness, but there was no time. They were coming, he could feel them. The moment they breached the surface, they gasped, scrambling onto the boat. Lisa collapsed, sobbing. Jake ripped off his mask, chest heaving. Then Lisa's breath hitched. Jake followed her, gaze back to the water. The figures were still there, watching, waiting, and then one of them tilted its head. Jake's breath stopped. It was wearing his dive suit, and it was smiling. A wide, unnatural grin that stretched too far, teeth gleaming in the deep. Then, slowly, it raised its hand and beckoned him back down. Jake knew, in that moment, that the ocean had marked him, and one day, it would call him back. Forever.